one day I'm going to write that book. One of these days I'm going to get around to writing that book. Does that ever describe you? Do you ever say that? A lot of fertility doctors want to write a book. A lot of fertility doctors have great experience to write for the base of a book. And some of you have. On today's episode, I bring on an REI who has written 2 books. One is Miracle Baby, A Fertility Doctor's Fight for Motherhood. The other is The Fertility Manual, Reproductive Options for Your Family. This is Dr. Dorette Noorhasan. She practices in Dallas. Before she joined CCRM, she used an opportunity in between practices to for parental leave for her son, as well as writing some of these books and beginning that publishing process, the lessons of which she shares with you. A lot of things that she found out the hard way that you might be able to skip over. But we talk about when is a good time to write the book, coming up with the concept, finding the time, how much time needs to be allocated, the editors, the publishers, and the other people involved, how many phases of editing, self-publishing versus publishing the traditional way, and a blend of the two. So we have a lot of the why and the what behind it, but as well as the logistical how. So for those of you fertility specialists thinking about writing a book, I hope that you benefit from this episode, whether you're somebody right out of fellowship or somebody who's going to regret it if they leave the workforce and that time thereafter, never having shared with the readership, with the public, what you want to in the form of having it immortalized in a book. Enjoy this episode of Inside Reproductive Health with Dr. Dorette Noorhasan. Dr. Noorhasan, Dorette, welcome to Inside Reproductive Health.
Thank you for having me on the show today.
We are going to be cracking this big egg of how do you write that book? I know a lot of your colleagues want to write a book. Some of them have, but for all of those that have written a public-facing book, I think that there's 10 more, 20 more for each of those that want to, and either haven't decided on a topic, haven't decided to devote the time, whatever it might be. They're intimidated by the task. Maybe it's a bucket list thing for them that they feel like they'll get to after they retire. But I really want to unpack how to do this with you since you've done it yourself. And I want to start with just the topic that you chose to write about and why was that important for you to do. So let's just start with the book that you wrote. Please introduce it and why this book now.
Yes, so very good. Thank you so much for going through that. So I've written 2 books. The first one is called Miracle Baby, A Fertility Doctor's Fight for Motherhood. And that's my personal life story of what it's like to personally have undergone 5 rounds of in vitro fertilization. That is 5 egg retrievals. And ultimately, out of that entire process, I got 1 good embryo and eventually transferred that embryo to a surrogate. And so that book goes over what it's like to see it from both sides of the exam table and to really put myself in my patient's shoes. And then in that book as well, there is a lot of my life story. So what it was like growing up as an immigrant child and coming to America, pursuing the American dream and becoming a successful physician. So there's a bit of a motivational, inspirational part of that book as well. And then the second book is the Fertility Manual.
Sorry to interrupt you. That book came out in 2019?
2019. Both books came out in 2019. So Miracle Baby came out in October, and then the Fertility Manual came out in November 2019. So the Fertility Manual, Reproductive Options for Your Family, that is a book. What I've noticed over the years of practicing is that as physicians, we speak the medical terminology, and sometimes we forget to break it down for others to really describe exactly what we're speaking about in simpler terms. So what I wanted to do was write a book about what patients need to know about the fertility process. So it wasn't meant to give actual advice, but essentially equip patients with the knowledge they need to then take that knowledge to go to their doctor or their IVF nurse and ask questions specifically about their care. So these were topics that I talked about every day what is infertility, the basic testing, treatment options. I talk about donor egg, donor sperm surrogacy, something I knew quite a bit about since I personally did it. And then the last chapter in that book speaks about the psychological component or the psychosocial component of infertility, because women do struggle, women and men do struggle with infertility, and it does impact their mental health. So that's what the second book was about, to give people some very basic knowledge so then they can be in charge of their care.
Did you set out to write both books at once?
Yes. So let's talk about how that happened. I did several rounds of IVF, and we got one good embryo and we transferred it to a surrogate. And I was so incredibly grateful because that was our only embryo and things were moving along quite nicely. And she had her due date lined up, and the opportunity to take some time off from private practice for a little while came up. When the child was born. And so as I was planning for his birth, I started telling my patients, hey, I'm leaving practice for a little while. I'm expecting a baby. And they're looking at me as if, where's that belly? There's no belly there. So then I really had to go through details of what exactly I was going through with my fertility treatments. And as I was describing that to patients said to me, oh, we really, really loved you and respected you. But now that we know that you've gone through what we're going through, we respect you even more. And this went on and on. I literally had to tell every patient that I was leaving. And they said, you should share your story with others because other people can benefit from this story. Hearing it from a physician who practices in vitro for her daily living and now who's undergoing these types of treatments, she should be the one to tell the story. So my patients were the ones that told me I needed to tell the story. And my patients are, incredibly kind. Some of them showed up with gifts to my office when I was getting ready to leave to take some time off from work. And they were bringing me gifts for my baby. And some of them, I hadn't even helped them have a child as yet. And so I asked them, I said, so why are you giving me baby gifts? I haven't even helped you as yet. And they said, because you're so kind and you're understanding and you know what we're going through. And we want to tell you how good you are. And so they were the ones that encouraged me to write these books. And so once my son was born, in between diaper feeds or diaper changes and baby feeds, I sat down on the computer and just wrote these books. And the words I couldn't type fast enough. The words were just coming and flowing very, very quickly. So I wrote both books incredibly quickly. Each book took me only about a month to write, believe it or not. So the writing part was very quick and easy. It's getting it published was the more difficult aspect.
So you're a fast writer. Have you always been a fast writer when you've had to write papers throughout your education? Were you always a fast writer?
I'm a pretty fast writer. And remember, I was speaking on two topics that I was quite knowledgeable about. So one is my life story and what it's like to be a patient. And then the other was topics I spoke to patients about every single day. And so these were easy things for me to write. And so I wrote the books very quickly.
How did you decide that they were going to be two books? At any point, did it cross your mind of I can thread the needle somehow and make both stories into one book?
No, I decided there were going to be two separate books. And the reason is the first book is essentially a biography of my life story or a memoir. And so that had to go in the direction of a story format, giving someone's life story and what they're going through, and the dramatic roller coasters of the trials and tribulations that we go through in life, including fertility treatments. So that one had to read more like a novel. And then the second book had to read more like a self-help book or an educational aspect. So there was no way I could combine them into the same book. They had to have been separate books.
You identified two very distinct concepts. And so it was the concept about your journey that came up first. And then by sharing that idea with people, it was the concept from the manual that came second, or am I out of order?
You're in order. That's correct. Exactly. So the novel came first, and then sharing basic fertility treatment options came second. Correct.
And each book took you about a month to write.
Yeah. So 2 months total. Each book took about a month.
With it, this is not an immaterial question from my vantage point. I think it's germane to people thinking about taking the time off. Were those 2 months after the baby was born or leading up?
So after the baby was born, I took many months off. I took essentially a year off. His first year of life, I was at home the whole year. I wrote the books in the first several months after he was born.
So what I'm wondering is how much time does someone need to take off? Of course, it's going to vary based on the individual, but can somebody do this without some kind of sabbatical, as far as you can tell?
Yes, they can. It depends again on the topic. If it's something simple and easy, like writing your life story, you should be able to tell your life story in a book as if you could tell some aspect about your day over dinner to someone else. So those things I felt were easy, and I could have done it over weekends if I wanted to. But I felt the topics were easy. Now, had I written on a topic that I was not familiar with, like something that's not my life story or something that I don't speak about every single day, that would require time, research. That would require a lot more time than just sitting and letting the words come through.
Well, I could think of my life story, I guess, and get it out on paper, but making it interesting would be a different task entirely. So how did that order work? Did you first just start, writing out things chronologically? When did you start thinking about how you were going to say it? Did that come as you were writing it or more in the editing process?
So that came a little bit before I started writing. So I knew I was going to write these books right before I left practice. And I made mental notes, literally just mental notes of how I was going to write it. And just like you said, chronological order seemed like the best way to go. Just it flows easily with chronological order. And so that's how I pursued it, just chronological order.
Okay. So the concepts came to you before you took the time off. Then you took the time off. They took about a month each. Did you then start working on the launching process, the editing process after book one, before book two, or were they around the same time?
So here comes the harder part. That writing the books was very easy for me. The harder part. So I thought, okay, hey, I have these 2 book ideas and I've written them already. At least the first, what I thought was a very reasonable first draft of them. So I started contacting publishers, and about a month or 2 went by and crickets. Didn't hear back from anyone. And I didn't spend enough time researching the process of writing a book. So let's talk about the process. And I will share the mistakes I've made, and hopefully others can learn from my mistakes as well. So the process, so after I didn't hear back from any of these publishers, a couple months went by, I decided to get on YouTube, Google, how to write a book, how to get it published, how to figure this out on my own. And what I found, so I started with the first book, Miracle Baby, the novel. And what I found was publishers wanted me to write a book proposal first. And I needed to send this book proposal to a literary agent. So I could not contact the publishers directly. I needed a middleman called a literary agent that I would send this book proposal to. They would vet it, and then they send it to the publisher. So I went about writing this book proposal. Now, the book proposal took quite some time. So here are the key aspects of the book proposal. The first part is just one paragraph, which is what's your elevator pitch. 2 minutes in an elevator. If you had 2 minutes in an elevator with someone, describe what your book was about. And then the next part of the book proposal was, what are my qualifications? What makes me credible to write on this process? and who my intended audience were. Another aspect of the book proposal, which is the aspect I found to be the most time consuming, is that I had to research and read every single book that was potentially a competitive book to the books that I wanted to publish. So I had to research and read them and then figure out, why was my 2 books different than these books? And why should any publisher want to publish my books? So that took quite some time to research, order all these books, read through all of them, and then figure out why was mine so different.
How many books did that end up being?
Oh, quite a few. This was a few years ago. It was quite a few. I think it took me like 4 months or so to get through all of them. It was quite a few books I went through. I don't remember how many, but it was quite a few books.
I'm talking like 10 books or like 200 books or
not 200. It was a little bit more than 10, maybe 20 or 30 if I could remember. It was quite a few. I mean, it was pretty exhaustive method to go through each book. It certainly was not 200. So I had to go through each book and figure out why mine was different and why should a publisher consider mine. And then the other aspects of the book proposal, you had to summarize each chapter. So just a 1-paragraph summary of each chapter, which that didn't take any time. And then some of them wanted your first chapter as a sample of your writing. Some wanted your first 3 chapters as a sample. So all of that had to go into the book proposal. So it took me several months to do this part. So I did this part, wrote the book proposal, and sent it to every single literary agent that I could Google and find. And I sent it probably to over 100 people. It was quite a few people. And I had to customize each book proposal to match what they were looking for, because not everyone wanted the exact same format of the book proposal. So I had to customize each one for each person that I sent it to.
And so when you're sending it to 100 people, this is 100 different publishers or 100 different literary agents?
Literary agents now. So I found names online. I started looking into what types of books they look at, those types of things, and just sent it and just crossed my fingers. I believe in the fact that if you don't try, you will never know. And so I just tried and sent it to everyone. And I heard back from a few people. So just maybe 4 people, probably not many. And essentially what they said was that I was not a celebrity or someone where they think a publisher would be interested in my books. So for example, I'm not a celebrity. I'm not a Kim Kardashian who has millions of followers. Why would someone want to read Dorette Noorhasan's books? Why is anyone interested in Dorette Noorhasan's life story or what she has to say about infertility? And now infertility is really a big topic, but from their perspective, from a marketing standpoint, they want to know, is this person marketable? And they didn't see that. And so I was pretty depressed after that. I'm like, okay, so I just wasted all this time doing all this stuff. And it was pretty sad, and I felt very defeated. And so around that time, I ran into several different people. So I ran into a friend I hadn't seen in about a year or two, and she had just self-published books on Amazon. And self-publishing on Amazon is free. And so I looked into it, but here are the difficult aspects of that, is that self-publishing on Amazon, there is no editing, there's no formatting. And so really anyone can self-publish. And so once you self-publish, you're in a bucket of books where no one has vetted those books to know if they're good.
99% of them suck. Yeah, for that reason, probably. So,
and then the second reason, at that time, Amazon had less than 10% of the book market. And the main reason I wrote these books were because my patients asked me to. So
in 2019, Amazon had less than?
This
10%?
was 28. I would think this was 2018. When I looked at it, 2018, it was less than 10% of the book market, or the ability to reach people.
When we say book market, are we talking about book sales or book publishing?
I think all of it in terms of books. And so when I looked at that, the main reason for writing it is I wanted to reach as many patients as possible, as many women and people as possible struggling with infertility. And I didn't feel like that was going to help me. So I thought about it and I let it go for a little bit. And then I was in church one day, and there was a guest speaker, and he's a motivational speaker. And he talked about the fact that he self-published, and he was kind enough to chat with me for a few minutes after church. And same thing, he told me about the self-publishing route, those types of things. And then about a week later, I met a physician, and her story really struck me. So she was a very busy physician in practice and was diagnosed with cancer, and eventually gave up practicing. Is a survivor from cancer, and now has written 8 books on things like surviving cancer, motivation. She's a motivational speaker. Her first 7 of those 8 books, she had a literary agent who then took it to the publisher, and they were easily published. And when she got around to writing her 8th book, which she tells me her 8th book was probably the best of all her books, because she had gotten really good at that point in terms of writing. When she finally did her 8th book, her literary agent retired, and she didn't have anyone to take it to the publisher. At that point, she couldn't get her 8th book published. Here she is, a physician. She's a cancer survivor, is writing on a topic that she's well versed on. She already has 7 books published, and no one is picking up her 8th book. And this is supposedly a better book than her previous 7. And so she decided to self-publish. And she told me about her self-publishing route. And I was getting, now many months had gone by, and I was getting to the point of where in a couple months, I would be going back to work full time. And so now having a child, a baby, going back to private practice, I told her about what I was struggling with in terms of getting books published, or my 2 books published the traditional way. And she told me about these publishers that are, they help you with the self-publishing process, but they're essentially real publishers. But you, the author, meaning me, would have to fund the publishing part as well as the marketing part. But at least I could at least have them do it. I wouldn't have to worry about editing or all of those things. And so I looked into those. And so there were several publishers that helped with the self-publishing process. And that was also, that took some time. I remember interacting with a publisher in New York, and they wanted me to sign this long legal agreement. And if I had failed to publish the book within 3 years of signing that agreement, then they had the right to publish the book. It was very, very interesting. And then I eventually found a publisher here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, who I was able to meet them in person and interact with them. And I gave them a hard copy of my book, the entire book, and let them read it. And they decided they would help me with publishing it. And so so I signed a contract with them, and they helped me publish both books. And it was easier for me that way. I was about to start private practice again, where I'm insanely busy. I have a young child, and there was no way I could do all of that. So after I signed the contract with them, there's still another year worth of work after that. So I signed the contract with them, I want to say maybe September or October of 2018. And then books would come out in October, November of 2019. But there's a process. So there are several rounds of editing. The first round, the first editor is an editor that edits just for content only. And that went quite well. Then there's a second editor that edits for grammar, making sure everything flows smoothly. And then there's a third editor that just does the final proof editing. So there's a series of editing for both books that happen. They were very instrumental in terms of helping me with the cover. I knew kind of what I wanted for the cover, but they were very instrumental in terms of doing the graphics, things that I didn't have time to do. Incredibly instrumental. In the book, The Fertility Manual, I have a figure of the female reproductive system, and they were incredibly instrumental in terms of tailoring that figure to exactly what I wanted it to show. So I found that incredibly helpful. And I'm incredibly lucky that I had written very good first drafts of those books, and it did not take a lot of red ink. So I didn't have to go back to the drawing board. But those publishers or the editors were incredibly helpful. And then once all of that was done, that took another 6 months, going through several rounds of editing through the 3 different editors. We had to work on marketing, doing interviews, social media. So I was very good about being a doctor. I forgot about doing things like social media and the huge aspect that has. And social media is free. I mean, I have a Facebook account and a LinkedIn account. At that time, I had Facebook and then LinkedIn, but I didn't have Instagram. I didn't have Twitter. I didn't have many of those things. So I had to learn social media, create profiles, and figure out how to use my social media to really get my books out there. And we did a very good job in terms of marketing the books prior to the release dates. And then so the release dates were in October, November of 2019. And then COVID hit March of 2020. And while there were a lot of people at home reading books after COVID, the publisher, the marketing company, they lost all their employees. No one was working at that point. And so really not much was done with my books during that time frame. So it took another year plus before we really started remarketing the books.
Couple months ago, I did an episode with Steve Rooks that had to do with Engaged MD. And I got so many emails from people saying, oh, we use Engaged MD. We love Engaged MD, and might end up having those people on the show too. But if you're a practice that doesn't use Engaged MD, you're now in the minority of practices. And why do people keep saying this to me? Why did Engaged MD become Inside Reproductive Health's first sponsor after 3+ years of being a podcast in this field? Why did I hold out for Engaged MD to be the first sponsor? Because they're the only ones that I've only heard good things about. And I swear somebody must have bad things to say about them. And I keep saying, email me if you do. I haven't gotten that yet. All I hear from people is how it's reduced the workload for their nurses, how their patients are better informed, how the rapport between the nurses and the staff and the providers is better with the patients because they've been educated. And then that time gets to be tailor fit, customized for that individual patient, how they have true informed consent and not just signing a stack of papers, but they understand what's being given to them and it's accounted for, and office staff doesn't have to track all that down. This is why I keep hearing overwhelmingly positive things about Engaged MD. So if you want to join the ranks of these very happy people, you can go to engagedmd.com/IRH. You don't have to. You can keep adding more work for your staff if you want. You can keep having more exposed risk and less informed consent if you want. But if you want what is described to me as somebody who's a third party as the biggest upside for your practice, I recommend going to engagedmd.com/IRH. If you want to stick it to me, you don't have to tell them that I sent you, but it does help the show. And it does also get you a 25% off your implementation fee, engagedmd.com/IRH. So one tip of advice would be don't write a book 6 months before any type of global catastrophe. So if anybody can predict that, they should try to avoid it. When you're talking about the proposal that you had to marshal for the literary agent, was there I got the elevator pitch, you had to research 20 or 30 other books. I've never heard that before. Did you have to submit an outline at that? Here's my chapter outline, and here's 2 sample chapters. Did you have to do that at any point in the process?
Yep, that was all part of the book proposal.
So that's in the proposal process. Is it all kind of like, is it all in one phase? Do they ask you for everything at once, or do they phase it like, okay, first give us your elevator pitch, okay, and your qualifications. Okay, now that you've given us your elevator pitch and your qualifications, now give us the the competitive analysis of these 30 books, and now that you've done that, give us the outline and the 2 sample chapters. Did they phase it, or was it all one ask from all of the literary agents?
It was pretty much one ask. So they just wanted a document pretty much with everything in it.
So, okay. So you exhaust that possibility, or you talk to about 100 different literary agents. You go to Amazon, you start to research self-publishing, but it's a crapshoot and you could be totally lost in the mire. So you choose this other option. And I want to make sure that I understand what kind of firm this is. So they are not a publishing house themselves, or they help you to publish on Amazon. Can you go back to that concept?
Mm-hmm. They are a publisher themselves. They are a true publisher. That's correct. But the way how the traditional publishing route works is you're a celebrity and they essentially foot the whole bill, and then they get a large part of the income that comes through because they did all the marketing, did everything. These types of companies, they are true publishers, but the author essentially foots the bill in terms of getting the books published and marketing.
Okay. And then and by getting the books published, that means the printing or the design cost for the ebook, the distribution cost. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
That's right.
And then are you paying for them for an editor? Is that all like part of a consultancy fee, or is there some kind of fee up front and then per volume type fee? How does a fee structure like that work for someone interested in that path?
So the publishing fee, it's all in one package. So it includes the editing, everything, just till the book's published. And then once the books are published, and it includes X number of books being published as well. And then once that happens, once you've sold all those books and you want to publish more, then there'll be another fee for that. So it's all part of the package price.
And then after that, do they get a cut of what you sell? How long do they stay involved in having a claim to what you're producing?
Well, so the rights to the books belong to me, and that's the great part about this, is that the rights of the book only belong to me at this point in time. And so whenever I want to stop the production of the books, I can. And
so do they have any kind of marketing framework for you to leverage? Do they have here's like a PR agency that we work with, or here's a way of us being able to book you some media spots, or is it, hey, go figure out how to use TikTok, kid?
They do have a PR agency that I use, correct. They do have a PR agency. And then I also have figured out my social media on my own. During that COVID shutdown, there was a good 6 weeks or so where essentially everything was shut down and only emergent surgeries were being done in hospitals and clinics. And so I was essentially at home for essentially 6 weeks. I may have gone to the office 1 or 2 times a week. But during that time frame as well, I started my own YouTube channel. I figured out how to do it, and just recently started my own TikTok. But they have a PR firm that helps set up interviews as well for me. But I've been managing my own social media. They do have their PR firm can manage your social media for you. But I kind of like managing my own social media. I put my own content out. It's nice. And it's my way of people seeing me, not just a doctor, but seeing a mother, seeing some of the things that I like doing, like running or yoga or things that I'm involved in. So I like doing my own social media now. Initially it was work, but once I figured it out, it's easy.
So how much of your social media now is still in service to promoting the book versus how much of it has become its completely own thing at this point?
A lot of it has become its completely own thing. So I will post pictures about what I'm doing, or pictures of patients who sent me their baby photos, or things that are going on at this time frame. Or for example, if one of my employees was the employee of the quarter, I post things. So a lot of it now is about me and what I'm doing at work, or what I'm doing with my books, or things that a new interest that I have. So a lot of it is about me.
Does your book give you a sort of, I don't know, an anthology from which to make other types of content? Do you use it in that way? Like, I have this romantic idea of when I write a book outside of the fertility space and I grow a different part of my social media arm, that it will be easier to create social content at that point, because I'll be, oh, like, this is a concept from the book. I'm going to make a video about this concept and make different pieces of social content from different concepts of the book. That might be just me thinking the grass is always greener. Do you use your book in that way?
I do. I do. I absolutely do use my book in that way. So the fertility manual, it's just fertility, and so things like posting baby pictures, those types of things. But the memoir about my life story, there are multiple aspects about that book I use. The last chapter in that book talks about me running a half marathon. So I'll post pictures of me exercising, or a large aspect of that book talks about my upbringing as an immigrant who then moved to America. So, for example, a couple of weeks ago, I posted a picture of this year. It was 20 years since I earned my MD degree. So I posted a picture that we took 20 years ago, me and my family, of what it was like to be an immigrant. And my sister and I were the first two to go to college and then to medical school, and tie it into the book, because the book is my life story of that upbringing as well. So I've been able to tie a lot of it into the book.
When did you feel like you had permission for yourself to write the book? I know that's kind of like a trite Brene Brownie type of word, give yourself permission. But I sometimes think, like, no, imposter syndrome can be a good thing. There's a ton of imposters out there right now. I feel like I'm writing a business book right now by actually running the business, operating the business. I don't think that I can write the book yet. I think there's a couple cardinal challenges that I really have to figure out in earnest. I guess, like, I could write like a smaller sales book, but like the book that I want to write, I feel like I'm gaining the experience right now to be able to write it someday. At what point, the point that you wrote it, is that, when was that, like, okay, now is time, or had you felt that way for a while?
That's a really, really good question. So my patients were the ones that motivated me to write this book. And I will tell you, I'm a super private person. I mean, I did those 5 rounds of IVF happened over several years, and I never told anyone about it. It was very, very private. Even my friends didn't know anything about it, because I didn't want people asking me, well, how come this cycle didn't work? And what are you going to do next? It was a super private event. So my patients didn't even had any idea I was even doing IVF. And I remember one of my egg retrievals. I went to work that morning. I did an egg retrieval in my own patient, then changed clothes, got into the stretcher, and let one of my colleagues do my own egg retrieval. So no one, I never really missed a beat in terms of work. No one really knew I was doing this. and sharing my personal story I was super scared to share my personal story because I've lived such a private life and I've been super careful about not sharing things I'm going through. I mean, who wants to hear a doctor complain about what she's doing? So I've been super careful about not sharing anything. And so my patients motivated me to write these books. So I did it. I wrote them, and I wrote them really fast, and it was easy and it was quick. And then I had a breakdown. I'm like, oh my God, I'm actually going to really do this. So I let my husband read the first drafts of both books. And because I mean, he's involved in it, and they're, especially in the memoir, it talks about our marriage and, us going through fertility treatments. And I said, are you comfortable with me sharing this information? And he's so incredibly supportive. He's like, yes, go ahead, do it. So he read the first draft of that book. I had him read the second draft or the first draft of the second book, the Fertility Manual. And after he read this book, he said to me, he's like, why didn't you write this book before? Because now I finally understand what infertility is. As we're going through the whole process, he's not in medicine, and all he did was just trust me that I was making all the right decisions for us to do this. And he had no idea what we were going through or really had a good grasp of the knowledge of anything we were doing. And so he was so grateful for that book. He's like, people need to have this book just so they can have some basic understanding of fertility. And so I felt good again. Okay, my husband was comfortable with me publishing these books, and I was fine. And after the publisher accepted the books and I signed the contract, then I had another nervous breakdown, like, oh my God, this is real. People are going to know my life story. Do I really want to share this? And so I called one of my girlfriends. She's known me for, oh my God, for probably 20 years, and just had like the super long talk with her. And she's like, just do it. You want to do it. And if people judge you, it's okay. You're human. So go ahead and do it, and don't be afraid. And so I did it. But yeah, every time I thought I was going to do it, I had a breakdown. So I didn't give myself permission. I gave myself permission initially to answer your question. And then, I doubted myself, and then I gave myself permission, and I doubted myself again, and then gave myself permission. So this was a constant thing.
So the voices sounded like they were from not necessarily being used to bearing yourself so publicly, and you're involving your family, and not sure if you were ready for that. Did the voice, and if it didn't, just say no, but I'm curious, did the voice of your colleagues pop into your head at all?
It did. And that was also one of the things that I spoke to my girlfriend about. I was worried that people would judge me for writing a book. And I'm not sure why people would judge me, but should I be sharing all of that information? I was scared, and I finally decided to do it. And the book's been out now for 3 years, or almost 3 years, I guess.
Why would they? Because, well, I guess it depends on how well your practice is doing, how well the book is doing, how well their practice is doing, how well they either did or decided not to write their book. Our guys are competitive. They're a competitive bunch, and they can be extremely supportive of each other, and sometimes they cannot be. And so I think that I might be assuming too much, but I don't think that I am. That could be a hindrance for some of your colleagues, is like, what will the other colleagues say? And I guess I would think, well, if they're just going to talk trash anyway, so who cares? If you want to write the book, you might as well, if you might as well write it. And I'm not talking about any one person, and or any one initiative, but I do know that that's something that holds people back quite often, and I wonder that as you start to see more positive feedback from the book, how did that play into your practice?
I didn't know that this would happen. but my books have had a positive impact on my private practice. And I didn't realize that would happen when I wrote the books because patients asked me to share my story. And the books are doing reasonably well, but my private practice has done amazingly well because now patients see me as a credible person. They have identified with me as someone who has stood in their shoes and know what it's like to do infertility treatments. And because of the books, and my social media, if you Google my name, you'll find pages and pages on me. 5-6 years ago, before I wrote these books, with me just being private practice, you maybe find a page worth of me on Google. So it's dramatically increased awareness of Dorette Noorhasan. And I have patients coming from all over the country. And because of COVID, and I still do quite a bit of telehealth, patients do tons of telehealth with me. And then they come into my private practice for the one-day workup. So they just come one day and do all their testing. And then I'm conveniently located where they can stay at a hotel when they come for their treatments. The books, while it's done just okay as books, in terms of its ability to help me in practice, it has made a dramatic impact on my practice. And I had no idea that would happen, but it's given me credibility, which has really improved my practice.
That impact as a new patient generator, or from when new patients have maybe already scheduled with you, or they come to find out about you, they read the book, and then that rapport helps with their treatment process?
Both.
So you've seen a big positive impact from the book in your private practice. It let you explore your point of view. And I want to circle back to that, because in the beginning of the interview, you felt like, man, I did all of this for nothing, when you were figuring out that whole literary agent rigmarole. Did you feel like when you wrote those, I know it was fast for you, but did you feel like you were able to articulate a point of view that you couldn't before? Because I stopped writing articles in probably 2017, 2018, I just got too busy running the firm, and I started the podcast in 2019. I was like, well, I don't need to write anymore. I'm just banging out one podcast episode after another. And you could see by me realizing in the beginning of this interview, oh, there's 2 books, how much preparation that I do for each interview. But I was really growing my audience from the podcast side, but I was missing the crafting of the point of view. And until you write, it's like, how do I even know what I believe until I mold it like clay? And so did you feel that way? Did it all just come out so naturally that, and so quickly, that you're like, okay, well, that was just me getting it out there? Or did you craft a point of view?
It came out naturally. I got really, really lucky. It just all just came out. I'm telling you, my fingers could not keep up fast enough on the keyboard as the words were just coming to me. And I remember one night I was sitting at the desk, and it was like 1 a.m. The kids finally asleep, and I'm just banging out words. I wrote like 2-3 chapters that night because it was just coming and flowing. And I'm like, I don't want to lose this. I feel everything. It's coming to me right now, and I just need to get it on paper or Word document. I needed to get it on paper. But it came naturally, which I'm very grateful for.
How different was that third editor's pass from your first draft?
Not very different. I got really lucky because the editing. If they did a lot of red ink, I would have had to gone back to the drawing board. And I got really lucky and incredibly grateful. Things worked out well.
I suspect that might be related to how much time someone needs to write as well. Do they need a sabbatical? Do they need an extended vacation? Whatever it might be. My drafts are so much different from the final product from the first draft. The first draft is like, I wouldn't give to an 8th grader to read. And when people pay me compliments on one of the articles that I write, it usually takes me 20 hours to write that article. And I've gotten it down with some help to probably maybe like 8 or 10, but it still takes me a while, and it's a lot of iterations. And so it sounds like you have a gift to where like you knew what you wanted to say from the get. And that could be a difference in how much time it takes someone, because you can find out what you want to say by writing. With regard to the process, knowing what you know now, you didn't even know what a literary agent was when you set off to do all of this, and you didn't know about the different avenues of publishing. What would you advise a colleague to do differently, if anything?
Very, very good question. So, better way to do it is to build your name first. Social media, those types of things. You want to become like a mini celebrity, because then it makes you more marketable when you go to these publishers. So that would have been the way to go first. It's very interesting though. It's like the chicken or the egg, which came first, because if you have a ton of social media, you've done a gazillion interviews, you have very wide presence, publishers are going to want to pick you up. But if you don't have those things and you have a great idea for a book, but no one wants to pick you up, well, you'll never get all those the presence that you want on social media or those types of things. And it really is the chicken or the egg. So if I had to do it all over again, I would say start with social media, market myself more, make my name bigger, then go to writing the book would be the next way to go.
Would you go the self-publishing route again, or would you go to if let's say you're a mini celebrity? Do you go and by mini celebrity, I don't know, like somebody that works on the Today Show, I guess, like like one of the people, like maybe not a Kim Kardashian, obviously, but somebody that has maybe a couple 100,000 followers. At that point, do you go back to self-publishing, or do you go the traditional publishing route?
I would try both and see what happens. I really would try both and see what happens. I have a fantastic relationship with my current publisher, and they're here in Dallas, which has been very beneficial. I've gone into their offices numerous times. I know everyone there. So that part is really good. But if you have 100, 200,000 followers on social media, then maybe you could go the traditional route because you already have a large following.
Well, we've talked about the why behind the book. We talked about the impact that it's had on your practice and your rapport with patients. We talked about how to do it. You get to decide how you want to conclude the show, Dorette. This is your colleagues listening, other REIs and other REI practice owners. How would you like to conclude this topic with them?
If writing a book is something that you're interested in doing, I think you should do it.
Where can people contact you?
Social media. I'm on all forms of social media, and my handle is @DoretteMD. So DORETTEMD. My books are on the website, just www.noorhasan.com. So just my last name.com.
We will link to both of those books in the show notes. One is the Fertility Manual, Reproductive Options for Your Family. The other is Miracle Baby, A Fertility Doctor's Fight for Motherhood. Dr. Dorette Noorhasan, thank you so much for coming on Inside Reproductive Health.
Thank you for your time.
You've been listening to the Inside Reproductive Health podcast with Griffin Jones. If you're ready to take action to make sure that your practice thrives beyond the revolutionary changes that are happening in our field and in society, visit fertilitybridge.com to begin the first piece of the fertility marketing system, the goal and competitive diagnostic. Thank you for listening to Inside Reproductive Health.